Chapter 60. In the strong twilight, over the mountains of Wales, draining of light, league upon league of darkly forested peaks, to the eye familiar, the occasional interruption of a cabin or plantation, chimney smoke, a grey patch of girdled trees amid the green pervading, a shade ascending one hollow at a time. The wind acquires at the dark a potency it did not possess in the light. An axe bit's blow quenched in living wood, a dog after a squirrel, a percussive sandwich of hammer, anvil, and the work between. Night over all this watershed how vast, that covers each soul in it like a breathing mouth, humid, warm, carrying the odours of living and dying, that takes back everything committed upon the land that day, without appeal, dissolving all in shadow. They have caught up with this era in the settlement of this West. Though not in all ways insane, yet Captain Shelby, avid for any occasion to quarrel, exhibits signs of mania upon the topic of land disputes, being often preoccupied from well before sun-up till far into the early darknesses with litigations great and petty, engrossments ditto, with boundary issues a particular passion, a fallen tree, a wandering chicken, the meanders of a stream, any pretext, any least scent of inconvenience will do. He admires this west line for its great size, though he's puzzled as to why there can't be a few angles someplace to accommodate a close friend, for example, or even more than one. Kings, Mason, with a what can we poor sheep do look, which Shelby declines to join him in. This is how they reason. In map-sized sweeps of the arm. Divide it thus, I command you. They can't be bothered with the fine details. Having inked a map or two, I know that impatience, though my sympathy reaches no further. Out here the king has few to count upon, and his troops will be fools to come much past Cumberland. You be certain to tell 'em I said so. Tell whom? Whoever may be asking. Do thou believe we're spies, Captain? Dixon, with genial tap-room menace, moving as if into range. Sirs, I've been out here since before the late war, and have offered my hospitality to many a spy of every persuasion, for, as spies must travel, so it follows some travellers must be spies. Yet I bar my door to no one. 'Tis a pursuit of men, away in the distant world, no more sinful than the making of rifles or the charging of quit rent Yet do I prefer an honest quarrel out in the open myself. 'Tis more manly somehow, don't you think? Dixon ambles closer, beaming. Yet 'tis a gormless spy indeed, who'd lurk where there are no more secrets to steal. How so? What is there that has not been visited, intentionally or not, 100 times? Gathering ginseng would be more profitable. Shelby is, of course, also a surveyor who ranges these mountains all about, bearing and wielding his instrument like a weapon. Oh, I saw upon the instant how this was. Darkly to Dixon, I saw how the ancient sorcerers must have enjoyed what they did. At our pleasure, we may look through this brazen tube, through glass mathematically shaped, and whatever desirable scene sweeps by as we turn it, why, 'tis ours for writing down the angle. Good heavens, what power! There is a love of complexity here in America, Shelby declares. Pure space waits the surveyor. No previous lines, no fences, no streets to constrain polygony, however extravagant, especially in Maryland, where, encouraged by the resurvey laws, warranted properties may possess hundreds of sides, their angles pushing outward and inward, all sides zigging and zagging, going ahead and doubling back, making loops inside loops. In America, 'twas ever Poe to simple quadrilaterals. Eh? Dixon nodding vaguely. He's never regarded his occupation in quite this way before. His journeyman years coincided with the rage then sweeping Durham for enclosure. Aye, and alas, he had attended at that altar. He had sliced into polygons the common lands of his forebears. He had drawn lines of ink that became fences of stone. He had broken up herds of fell sheep, to be driven ragged and dingy off through the rain to gates and exile. He had turned the same covetous angles as the Welshman, though perhaps never as many, for Shelby seemed seized with goniolatry, or the worship of angles, defining tracts of virgin land by as many of these exhilarating instrumental sweeps as possible. Things to survey your domain, even if you don't own it. Here at the Allegheny crest ye may stand and look either way down mile after mile of the visto ye've cut, and from your eminence pretend that you own it. Every girl, every gambler, tonic salesman, and banjo player that comes down that line could easily be paying tribute to somebody. Not a lot, no worse than quit rent, a nuisance levy, really, even if it's a song or a card trick or 10 minutes in the hayloft. Shelby accompanies them over North Mountain, whereupon it begins to rain and snow, and continues so for the next 10 days. The cards come out, and the chapbooks and dice and bottles. Mason goes to sleep, requesting that he be wakened only in case of spring. Dixon tries to learn from Captain Zhang something of the Lua Pan in exchange for instruction as to the sector. The attention we are paying these zenith stars, he suggests, in which the stars has the attention we are paying these zenith stars, he suggests, has brought me to imagine an anti-celestial or backwards astrology, in which the stars must be projected inward somehow, mapped from the celestial sphere. Oh, fuck it. That was Dixon. Okay, I'll just continue. Onto the surface of our globe. At Greenwich, for example, the zenith star is Gamma Draconis, putting Britain into the terrestrial sign of Draco, the dragon. Just so, the geomancer twinkles. Yet, in Durham, we mean something different when we say dragon. Ours are not at all the Chinese variety. Some, like the Lambton worm, lacking wings and a fire-breathing capacity, may indeed be of a distinct species. You've seen such a creature. Heard the story when growing up. As Lambton Castle lies almost upon the North Sea, we at Cockfield knew it as a Wear Valley tale, that like an ageless salmon had worked its way over the years upstream to us. At the Market Square and Bishop, as at Darlington Fair, the tale was often performed by troops of travelling actors, 6 of whom would be needed for the part of the worm. The drop was painted to suggest the sea fret whispering along the walls, mysterious shapes in the park beyond, as romantic as you please. Today the country round Lambton is thick with collieries, and pretty much given over to staiths and chutes and waggon rails. But the river then was purer and wilder, not yet altogether converted to the service of the Christian God, though, as it happened, fishing in it on Sunday in these parts had long been forbidden. They take out pipes, which Captain Zhang fills with a blend of cured vegetation that he will describe only as Chinese tobacco, courteously igniting both with embers from the fire. The heedless John Lambton, his lordship's heir, a young man as malapert in company as he is masterly in the stream, his own reach of the Wear in particular, has long refused to honour this rule. One Sunday, instead of the salmon trout he believes his due, he pulls in a small snake-like thing with a double row of horrid little vents either side of it. From its head down the body, gasping open and shut, 9 pairs of them. At first he takes it for a lamprey, but lampreys have only 7 pair. This thing is different. He feels a strange cold at his temples, a conscious vibration in the fishing line. It seems to him almost that the creature is gazing into his eyes with a look of intelligent evil. Just then his friend Reginald comes galloping up with a couple of pack horses. "All right then, John, come along. There'll be no Moors left by the time we get to Jerusalem." "What?" "The crusade. Oh, bother, you said you'd come. I say, what's that on your line? Ghastly thing. Throw it back in. Let's go bash old Abdul. What? "Yes, but Reggie, I'm not sure the river's quite the place for it. Best interests of the fish and so on. Here, look ye, here's this hole with some stones round the edge. I'll just chuck it in here, shall I? But isn't that someone's well? Some tenant or something, who cares? And with one of those knightly flourishes, the young fool, damned in the instant, actually tosses the worm into the well. "Oh, John," cries Reggie, "that's so amusing." And thus, cheerily, the lads are off to the east, where a number of desperate adventures wait them. Meanwhile, the worm is far from idle, having almost immediately begun in that womb of wet stone to grow. Local people hear it thrashing about, and the bravest, as they peer down into the echoing dark, may almost see it. Soon the water has acquired an unpleasant taste, metallic, sour, heavy with a reptilian musk. Buckets let down do not come back up. Creaking noises are heard at night as the well's casing is brought under some enormous force, till one morning, as the sun rises, so up over the rim of the well appears a great blazing pair of eyes, the closely set, purposeful eyes of a predator. Slowly, with no appearance of effort, it begins to ascend from the well, accompanied by a terrible poisonous odour, flowing up over the edge. Indeed, it keeps coming for longer than it should. Everything living in the area, including the vegetation, stop what they're doing and attend. The worm seems quite hungry. Taking its time, the worm proceeds to one of the bats or islands in the river, where it sets up its base of operations. Its needs are simple: food, drink, and the pleasure to be had from killing. It eats sheep and swine. It drains milk from cattle, 9 at a time. The number 9 recurs in the tale, though the reason is dark. And careless dogs, cats, and humans are but light snacks to it. Around it a circle of devastation appears, pale and soiled, which no one enters and which the world must keep shifting for, a little at a time as it goes on widening. The worm each day venturing a little further from its base, till at length the circle of terror advances to include a direct view of the battlements of Lambton Castle itself, the final sanctuary, surely inviolable, although the people in the castle dare not try to organize an exodus, for the worm, when it must, can travel at great speed, faster than horses can gallop. They have watched in terror many chases to the death across the tide plain below, as, once alerted, the worm has easily cut its victims off in the open, far from any refuge or escape. So there begins an obsession by the worm. The chapel is never empty now. The steward has begun taking inventory. Rationing lists are in early but serious negotiation. Days once idle are now filled with defensive chores. Engineers try to get the trebuchet on the roof into working order, tweaking the shape of the sling release hook. The worm has by now grown so large that it may comfortably coil round the entire castle. One day there will come to it some sign, the call of a raven, the exact shape of a moon, the racing shadow of a cloud, which will lead, by an unreadable train of serpent thought, to a convulsive breaching of these walls, and a merciless search within. A face suddenly looming in the roofless sky. A feast. No one can say when. The evil one has Lambton Castle literally in its embrace. The local folk keep a vigil, blending in against the brush on the sombre hillsides, calculating how fast they'll have to move when the creature turns its attention to them. Days pass. Presently, weeks. The worm continues to enlarge its zone of emptiness, but with a change of centre, returning now after each excursion to coil about the castle, where it lies all night, digesting loudly its day's predation. It is into this increasingly desperate siege that John Lambton now returns from his crusade. At first look, impaling foreigners seems to have agreed with him. He is tanned and fit and easy in the saddle. But beneath the hearty mask lies a dread of what he will encounter. Approaching the castle, he can smell the worm long before he sees it. He would have much preferred a dragon, dragons having from time to time in County Durham chosen to infest the roads and lay desolate the countryside, it falling usually to such known anti-draconical families as the Latimers, Weevils or Mowbrays to respond. But those creatures were winged and clawed, fire-breathing, noble in conformation, the reptilian detailing ever harmless, almost an afterthought, nothing like what John Lambton, rounding the last bend before home, beholds, recognizes, and understands as his own creation, something he must now before God deal with. Time has not been kind to the worm he threw into the well. It had been unpleasant enough to look at when only elver size. Now, despite what he has seen in the east, he must labour not to turn away. The 18 vents have grown astonishingly, and hang, pulsating, each surrounded by a deep black annulus of something glistering and corroded. The face has lost the youthful malevolence that Lambton remembers, has rather become deep in its abandonment, now purely a weapon in the service of bloodlust. A serpent's gift for paralysing its prey with a certain gaze that the potential luncheon, once returning it, is helpless to defy. Even Lambton, though at a safe enough distance, finds it strangely attractive. He has not exactly been to the Holy Land. Where he ended up, in fact, was Transylvania, this being one of the very last crusades, taken up more in a privateering spirit by one Cardinal Cesarini and a party of adventurers from many lands, who, by breaking the truce of Szeged and then losing at the Battle of Varna, helped prepare the way for the Turks who were to capture Constantinople a few years later. During a long Iliad of hard soldiering and small, mortal, never decisive engagements amid dramatic hilltops, haunted castles, mysterious flocks of bats that always seemed to be lingering about, Lambton one night, seeking diversion, had visited the encampment of a band of gypsies, who included in their number a sibyl, widely respected for having successfully foretold every wedding, birth, adultery, and flow of wealth in this locality for longer than anyone could remember. Solemnly, she informed him of the exact situation prevailing at Lambton Castle. "Then must I hasten home to destroy this monster. Shall I prevail?" "Boxanat, I do not do deaths. I am far too cheerful. You want to see a Romanian for that sort of thing. 'Twould be little more than a sporting contest. Young Lambton talking fast. No more violent than jousting, really. My lord, please. My time is as precious as yours. What I can do is bring in a priest here, divide the fee, arrange an oath for you. Anything, he assured her, but quickly. The oath was fairly simple. He read it over a few times, couldn't find much wrong with it, so willingly knelt beside his sword and vowed that if God should allow him victory over the worm, he would sacrifice unto him the first living thing he then happened to see. There are penalty clauses, the priest helpfully pointing them out, upon the long piece of parchment he had just signed. If I prevail, then so drenched in blood shall I be that bloodshed will weigh less upon my conscience than it does even here in Transylvania, avowed the open-faced yet sombre young ear. Therefore I shall not default. Once back in Durham, however, having come to think of God under the aspect more of fortune than of anything more churchly, he understands that his duty also includes providing what he can himself on earth to shorten his odds. Choosing from among the small crowd of youths always to be found when the worm is away about the approaches to the castle seeking engagement as runners, Lambton arranges for his father. Immediately the worm's destruction shall be signalled by a blast upon a hunting horn to send out one of the castle hounds. Neither Lambton thinks of this as cheating. It will be a legitimate sacrifice. Every one of those dogs is like family. Young Lambton next rides up to Washington, the Colonel's ancestral home, in fact, to consult with the armour-smith who fitted him out for his crusade. Galloping towards the glow of the forge, visible for miles, now and then reflected in the weir, he considers his basic tactical problem, which is the worm's reported ability, even hacked into separate pieces by conventional sword work, to reassemble itself and fight on. I've been looking into this very difficulty, the armourer greets him. Glad you came by. Here, come and see. Inside the shop, lit by the lurid glow of the coals, with a sweating apprentice staring at them unfathomably, gleams a suit of armour, to young Lambton's exact measurements, provided all over with hundreds of firmly attached sword-quality blades, whose honed edges flicker with sanguinary light. Perfect. Perfect. It won't be able to use its coils. It'll have to come head on, and happen I'll get lucky with my pike. They discuss tactics far into the night. He returns with the armour, packed in straw. For the first time he understands that everywhere about, for leagues, sleep souls in real bodies, mortal as any in Hungary, impossible longer to ignore, and that at dawn, by way of their dreams, will they all wake knowing what is to happen that day. Young Lambton chooses to wait out upon the worm's own bat, the river flowing swiftly by on either side. Birds are subdued, treed. For the benefit of observers, of whom there are many, he kneels a moment, appearing to repeat his sacred oath, before rising to put on, very carefully, piece by razor-keen piece, his bloodletting suit, till at last it is ready. Then he hears it, the unimagined tons of wet and purposeful flesh, moving a clatter through the reeds, ever closer, till out of the riparian mist emerges towering the savage head, the death-like face of the great worm. It hisses in a long exhalation. When the smell reaches him, young Lambton smiles grimly. Plenty of time to vomit when we're done, thanks. The fight is slow, bloody, repetitive. A dream, fever-shot, unwaking. It lasts most of the day. Small boys approach as close as they dare. Adolescent rogues comment upon the weaponry, the suit, the hacking technique. Townsfolk watch from the hillsides, the red, thrashing immensity filling the river, and the tiny, glittering night. To his obstinacy there seems no limit. Those who remember him as a flighty and lazy child marvel at the change. Before he went off to Jerusalem, he'd have run away, the bugger. Young Lambton fights on. At last, after too many cuts, deeper and deeper, the worm's capacity for self-repair is overcome. It lets out a series of last liquid, hateful screams, echoing up the valley, all the way to Chesterless Street, and perishes, to be borne away, most of its blood ahead of it, already halfway to Dogger Bank, chunks of flesh forever separate, out into the North Sea, where even the most voracious of the fish will only pick at it. With the last of his strength, Lambton climbs to the now delivered castle, stands before it and blows upon his oliphant. The dogs inside hear it and all start barking at once. They grow so agitated that none of the Lambton servants dares approach them. Meanwhile, blissfully having forgotten about the terms of the oath, vertiginous in a storm of emotions, the elder Lambton can think only of seeing his son again. He is an aged man, but he runs as he can over the drawbridge, arms held out. "John! Oh, my boy!" He is, of course, the first living thing young Lambton sees. "Eh!" Young John just stands there, almost too tired to realize what has happened. Now, by the terms of his contract, 'tis his father he must kill. It would be easy. So foolish in his transport is the old man, that a single embrace, folding him tightly but without mercy into the bladed vibrisses and breastplate of the worm-stained armour, would do the job. He could say he had been too exhausted to think. Then again, the oath was taken in Hungary. As God exempts England from many of Europe's less agreeable obligations to history, so surely must oaths taken in foreign lands, at which foreign priests and gypsies attend, be without force here. He allows himself this sophistry. It delays acting upon what he already knows, that he cannot kill his father, that he must break the oath, as he once consciously broke the truce of Seged. Thus already corrupted, why shouldn't he? He lets go his sword, the image of the cross he has sworn upon, lets it fall, turns, walks away, looking for someone who can help him out of the edged, and now perhaps even venomous, iron weapon he is wearing. Henceforth, when attending to internal business, he will put it on again and again for the rest of his life. The penalty is stipulated in the contract to remain in force for 9 generations, one for each pair of holes in the creature, was that no Lord of Lambton die in his bed. Under this gipsy curse, one by one they drowned, they were killed in battle. Wakefield, Marston Moor, sure 'twas, none died in bed. The last, the 9th Lord, was Henry Lambton. And one of my letters from Durham brought me, whilst at the Cape, news that he had died 3 weeks after the transit of Venus, riding across the new Lambton Bridge in his carriage. Halfway between shores, murmurs Mason, his mortal transit how brief, never to reach Lambton, his own bit of earth. Actually, he was heading the other way, says Dixon, out over the weir, into the world, another adventure. Cruelly served, it seems to the Reverend. 9 innocent generations. Whatever aid against the worm young Lambton invoked, its source required blood sacrifices. Because he spared his own father's life, it cursed him and his line most grievously for hundreds of years. What agency could be so remorselessly cruel? Is it possible that at the battle in the Weir, the wrong forces won? What? Christ won that day? Dixon, whose present state of religiosity is a puzzle to everyone, appears to find it curious that anyone could think otherwise. Christians won, anyway, pronounces Captain Shelby. Howbeit, Reverend Cherrycoke suggests, the worm may have embodied an older way of proceeding, very like the ancient alchemists' tales, meant to convey by symbols certain secret teachings. "'Tis that worm in that well, that's the signature here." Set in a tent opening, twilight breeze off the mountain flowing in around him, flaming autumn sky behind him, Evan Shelby is suddenly taller, more sly and cruel than he seemed at first meeting, with a way of rolling his eyes to convey Celtic madness. The ancient figure of the serpent through the ring, or sacred copulation, a much older magic and certainly one the Christians wanted to eradicate. Thoughts that in my line of work are too often denounced as Stukliesque, or at least Stonehengical, adds the Reverend. Not to mention Masonic, Dixon broadly pollicating his partner, but Mason is hundreds of chains removed into morosity, accepting without full attention a glazed jug of the local white corn whisky from the captain, who continues. Nevertheless, sir, the Serpent Mound, which is at Avebury in England, looks very like one I have seen to the west of here, across Ohio. They might have been built by quite similar races of people. Red savages in Britain? Reverend Cherrycoke a bit puzzled. Sir, when you go out there and talk to them about it, Captain Shelby insists, the Indians tell you that the serpent, as the other earthworks unnumbered of that country, was already ancient by the time their own people arrived. Indians speak of a race of giants who built them. I had to hide all night once within the coils of some serpent. They fancy the fiercer animals. All night the Shawanese kept their distance, and I even managed to sleep, briefly but in great comfort, somehow certain that they would never venture close enough to find me. I woke strangely energized, The foe had vanished. The dawn was well underway. In the distance, a wench shouts, "There, Tom, you've ripped me bodice again." Captain Shelby rolls a paternal eye outdoors in her direction. Nothing that passes here must escape him. The surveyors, enjoying previous acquaintance eastward of here with wilderness squires upon the model of Captain Shelby, have already discussed his character. Large eyebrows, Mason had opined, betray a leaning to pugnacious eccentricity. There is a passage in Pliny to that effect, or there ought to be. We're about as far from Philadelphia here as Durham from London, Dixon offered. Much further if you figure in the trees and things, precipices, gorges, and it seems quite like home, west being for Americans what north is for Geordies, an increasing likelihood of local power lying in the hands of eccentrics, more independence, more Scottismus, as they'd say. And brows of dauntless courage and considerate pride, waiting revenge. The Reverend had quoted the Milton upon Satan. And really the odd thing, the captain's eye now rolling back, fiendishly to play full upon Dixon, is that from the level of the ground, why it seems but a high wall of dirt, the only way even to make out the serpent shape of it is from 100 feet straight up. Dixon reddens, believing for no reason that Shelby somehow knows of his childhood flights over the fells. There must be a hilltop, a tall tree close by. Not close enough to spy down upon it from, regrettably, sir. Anyone who wonders what imps look like in their middle years would be perhaps more than satisfied with Shelby's fizz at the moment, malice undiminished, with a daily schedule that leaves him too little time to express it. Then Mason catches himself about to ask Captain Shelby how Captain Shelby can know what the plan view looks like unless he himself gained an impossible altitude, noting also the thicketed eyebrows of the Welshman waiting, rearranged for just this question. You must appreciate this is no idle drudgery, not some band of savages groping about earthbound for the correct shape. Rather, 'tis a sure artist's line, the curves sweeping in preordained accommodation to the river. If I grow too rhapsodic, pray set the dogs upon me. You would need to see one of these works to understand. End of chapter.